Life does not stop because there is a challenge.
Your setback is preparing you for a comeback. Part of the journey of getting a baby young gave me an opportunity to want to compete with men.
Whatever it must be, whatever it needs to be, has been so very judged and so very marginalized that it doesn't matter where we are, we seem to somehow be judged for the way our body is shaped, the way we dress across, the who we are, the whether we speak, the whether we don't speak, the being in silence, the wearing the skirt, the wearing the pants. I'm going to say to you that patriarchy is not just in Africa, it obviously is in Australia as well. So today I have my favorite person in the world in the room, and I'm not going to lie about that. Nomsa Mahlangu is both a prominent figure in African university sports. She's currently been serving as a director of sport at University of Johannesburg, but this rap sheet that Nomsa has is probably one of the most incredible. I had the pleasure of meeting Nomsa around 5 years ago. And she not only hails from significant leadership roles, she is a formidable and authentic and incredible leader and woman in the world. She's both a senior director of sport at the University of Johannesburg. She's been the past president of the Federation of African University Sports, the first ever female president. And she was the first woman to be elected into the position leading the continent in the Federation of University Sports in Africa. She's the chairperson of FASU Gender Commission. She's also served as a National Executive Committee member of South African Football Association, and she's been a huge advocate for women in sports. As a woman, she's not only achieved so many things in her field, but she herself has gone through challenges and led the way. She's brought a child up herself. She had her child very young and showed the world that you could achieve both as a woman and as a leader, no matter what your circumstance. It's always humbling to sit with Nomsa, and I know that every conversation and every discussion I have with her is one that's marked with both the tenure of friendship, of real respect between colleagues, and of a woman who I will always learn from. Nomsa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Graziella, for having me. And I'm humbled to obviously have this conversation with you, but also to share my journey, because I honestly believe that whenever you listen to a story, something out of that story inspires one, and it also has a possibility of changing your life and a possibility of you understanding that your challenges are not unique to yourself, but other people have faced them and they have triumphed over them.
You know, you've done so many things, and I know currently you have a challenge. You know, you've been through lots of circumstances, and I guess left of center today to have you in the room through circumstance. And I think we've talked about this quite often. As a leader, you don't get the opportunity to put things down on the floor and say, I can't turn up today. I can't show up. I can't be there. Leadership is always about that one thing that you and I smile, laugh, and cry about, because there are times where you want to stop, but you can't. And, you know, there's a different tenure of leadership. And I guess I'm going to throw you a wild park question and say to you, you know, the days when you don't want to lead and you want to just say, I can't, it doesn't leave you, does it? When you have to deal with so many other things.
It doesn't leave you, and it can't leave you, and you have no option but to show up. Leadership is all about showing up, not for yourself, but for the people that you lead. And again, even if you are not actively doing something, you have to inactively ensure that those that you have delegated to are able to deliver. Because as a leader, whilst I can delegate to Graziella, I must be available for Graziella to consult, to bounce off ideas. And the reality of leadership is that you would want to take time out, But in that timeout, you are strategizing. People would say, I often have weekends where I say, I'm not going to use my phone, I'm not going to speak to anyone, but I find myself speaking to people. And the reality is that it is the nature of leadership. It is what comes with leading people. And as I spoke about in active participation, silently you are leading, silently you are doing something. And it becomes important also as leaders that whilst we want to switch off, you can't completely switch off. I believe that when we completely switch off is when we've passed on, because reality is that life is a gift, life is something that we need to embrace. And as long as we are breathing, we have to provide that support, that leadership, because for me, leadership is also supporting people. And for me to be supporting you, I don't have to verbalize it, but I have to put it in action. As they say, action speaks louder than words. It doesn't matter what people do, what people say, but what matters the most is what they do and how they do it to influence your journey as a leader, but also you as a leader influencing those around you. Because good leaders are all about how the people have improved. It's not about you or people carrying bags for you. I often watch how a lot of leaders want to be served as opposed to them serving, because leadership is about serving. And I'm one of those favorite people that favors servant leadership. When you say, I want to lead, it means you want to serve your people. You give yourself to the people. You give your life to the people in a way, because whatever you do in my formal role and in my personal capacity, it has an impact on those around me.
It's quite special for me to listen to you saying that, because in governance, leadership, equity, that diversity and inclusion piece, servant leadership is equally important. And I guess what I would say to you too is servant leadership is not just about what you do as a leader. It's also about those around you being early adopters of servant leadership, because it's a two-way street. You may have a team of 5 or 6 other leaders that you have to work with or you have to delegate to. So the responsibility is almost shared. And we have spoken about this before, where you are leading, you're being a servant leader, then those around you being the early adopters or the adopters of servant leadership, then in their tenure, they become those that delegate forward, and you need to rely upon them to pass that culture forward. So leadership no longer, not in this world of AI, technology, and good governance, can any longer be just singular, just one person. It's a collective. And I guess in having said that, and if I asked you to look at your history and the things you've learned most about collaborative leadership and servant leadership, what have you observed? What have you seen? What have you seen work and what have you seen doesn't work?
Well, once we speak of servant leadership, it's also important that as we serve people, there are also situations that would call for us to become authoritative leaders. There are situations that would call on us to become democratic leaders. And reality is that in a collaborative effort, you don't have to only rely on yourself to find solutions. Where you have 2 or more people, you know that there's more brains in the room. And the most important thing is to surround yourself with people that would tell you the most uncomfortable things, because a lot of the times we have leaders that tend to think that they know it all. And I always say to the young people around me, the only, probably now with AI, the only sources that would give you all the information that you want are search engines, AI, and the like. But when it comes to human beings, we need to rely on a whole lot of other resources outside ourselves. That is why it is important to collaborate locally, regionally, and even internationally. Me and you met on a platform at an international level, and we started collaborating because a lot of the times you can't become an island. I'm from Africa, but now I'm having a conversation with you from Australia. Now, these conversations are helping both of us understand each other's contexts, understand each other's history, but that also gives you an opportunity to be able to get into somebody else's world so that you can use their own lessons to improve yourself. But when we have people around us, they don't have to be mini us. They need to be as unique as they can, but do the things that are correct. And I always say to people, you don't have to lead like Nomsa. Lead like yourself, but ensure that you do not compromise anything in the process. Honesty and integrity are things that cannot be changed. It doesn't matter whether it's a Graziella leading, is a Nomsa, or is Zanele. Those are non-negotiables in any leader's journey. So, in essence, I think as leaders, we need to be open to criticism and take a step back. And as my grandmother always said, you have two ears and one mouth. So, you need to speak less and listen more. And that will allow you as a person to grow because at times when you've done something so often, you even don't see when it's actually no longer working because you are on autopilot. So you think it works and it doesn't.
The key to that, though, too, is you have to not only think it, but do it. And I think you said something really important. You have two ears, you have one mouth. So you spend more time doing this, less time doing this. But when you do speak, you also need to take, and I'll take that one step further. For me, when I listen to you, and I know we've had so many conversations about this, and I recall we sat down with a couple of panels that I pulled together. There was yourself, Karen Webb Moss, Florette Blackwood, and another couple of really great leaders. And we sat there and we talked about, I think Michael at that point too, we were really kind of drilling into, and in the middle of COVID, that whole essence of, well, now we really do have to not just think about it, but we have to do it, because we have to worship through the temples of our minds through our actions, but we need to show our actions in a technological world and somehow reach someone on the other part, the other continents that we work alongside, because we only had technology for 2 years. We were forced to work together through this mechanism. And this is what built our connections. Suddenly, we're doing work with so many different countries and saying, right, we're going to make this work. And we were collaborating around dinner tables, around let's just have a cup of coffee online and have a conversation. And it changed the way that we communicated as leaders. We no longer had to travel, and spend so much money going different places. We found we could sit here and say, look, let me show you my world. Let me understand your world. And so we could then work together. Nomsa, in that time, I think I learned so many great things from you and so many other of the people in the room. One of the things that really impressed me was your leadership of FASU at that time. And there were significant projects and significant things you were putting into place during a very challenging time when the pandemic was hitting. What are some of the things that you're incredibly proud of that you've done around both the athlete and sporting sector? But I think very much it's how you managed to make things work at that time. What was significant for you? What had you done at that time that you think, yep, that was so necessary and I'm really proud of it?
Hi, Graz. I seem to have lost you for a moment, but we're back on. So
Yeah.
I think the pandemic time was a really, oh wow, it was a special time around the world where I think individuals, communities, we got opportunities to enjoy the things that we never thought are enjoyable. Um, we were forced to stay at home. And in that staying at home, at a personal level, it allowed us, those who were lucky enough to be with their families, it allowed us to connect because you were with each other 24/7. You were not allowed to go anywhere. You couldn't go anywhere. And I think it also gave us an opportunity to innovate because at that particular time, when it all started, as you said in when you were asking this question, that technology has really helped us. It saved us a lot of money, as you say, but it also saved us a lot of time because for me to travel to Australia, it will take me more than 24 hours to get to you. But now I'm in a conversation with you. I only had to plug and connect. But that time gave more of us an opportunity to engage with each other because there was no other way for us to find better ways of doing things. So we use technology to have conversations. We use technology to innovate and plan better. But it also gave us time to rethink, to reimagine university sports at a global level because remember at that particular time, I think if I'm not mistaken, we were planning for the FASU games, but they didn't happen because we couldn't travel and all of us were scared because we didn't know what this pandemic is really, really doing to the world. And when it was reopened, we then were doing things much better, which one improved the way we delivered on our tournaments. Two, it also gave us an opportunity to do more with less. Um, Doing more with less means that we needed to stretch our budgets because when things are normal, you always want to go extravagant. Uh, the, it also gave us an opportunity to cut out the not important things.
Yeah.
And I think that also gave us an opportunity to save a lot of money because, as you know, with games, you would have an opening, you would have non ending receptions, but we then had to look and say, what is important? What do we need for us to have a tournament? You need athletes, you need playing venues, you need accommodation. All the other frills you cut down, they are not important. You don't need them to deliver a tournament. So it more than anything, we reimagined how we could do things successfully without adding the add-ons like the old wedding dresses with a lot of frills, a lot of bedazzles and whatnot. You don't need that. You just need simple to the point. You deliver, you move on. But we had more conversations that built the university sports space. We had more conversations with all stakeholders. And those conversations didn't take much from anyone because we were all in the comfort of our homes, being engaged with people from all over the world. But out of that came more interest, more leaders, and more supporters because people then got to know more about what we do through obviously technology and um, social media. And I was never really a I'm not really big on social media, but at that time, it forced me to go into social media.
You know, one of the things that I think I'm going to pick up that you said there that was very, very important was the mechanism that forced us to connect. And social media had its benefits, and it has its benefits. I mean, obviously now we are working in an era where we're thinking, how do we manage or control the way our information is spreading? Or perhaps negative social media can happen, or negative media can happen, because we're also seeing that we're fed certain things. So algorithms will take us one place. We don't necessarily
Mhm.
choose. But during the pandemic, we did choose. We actively chose. We actively chose to do things. I remember that Minister Grange from Jamaica, what we did with, you know, the island of Jamaica, 2,000 athletes, and working with the Minister of Gender, Culture and Equality, working with UJ, working with other universities in Africa. So the Africa Caribbean became very important, because suddenly the Africa Caribbean said, oh, hang on a minute. And Pacific was the same. We rely upon the community that sport builds. We need that sense of community. And without travel, how are we going to get that sense of community? And how are we going to keep both the business of sport alive, but the opportunity of sport alive? So our young people will continue to use that as a mechanism to grow. And that was that first question. How do we keep the community alive? And I think that was my next lead for you is you've often referred to sport as more than sport. It is a community builder. Tell me a bit about what you took out of the pandemic and continued to do in your leadership to circumvent. We don't need a lot of fancy things. We don't need to take that one point. We don't need the frills of the wedding dress to have the wedding. You know, the wedding is more about the partnership, right? So we don't need the dress up. We were able to do so many things that enabled us to commune and have partnership and relationship. What did you
Mm.
take out of that you've managed to continue? Because, you know, we still are having the challenges of the pandemic. I mean, it's not over. It's not over.
No, it's not. Um, so out of the pandemic, the importance of community and human connection is something that for me was something good, something great that had happened, because at that time I had not really spent much time with my granddaughter, and I was forced to spend time with her. And I remember she asked me to make noodles, only to find out that I couldn't really make this thing. And she's like to me, "You are so old, you can't make noodles. What do they teach you at your work?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I honestly can't make noodles. And this 2-year-old is telling me off. And at that time, we then started doing things together. And that is something that I still do in my personal life. I would take a weekend off just to spend time with her and the family, because it is something that really didn't bother me, that I would come home late at night. At times she's already sleeping, you just looked at her and you left. But now it forced me to spend this time, but not only with her, because after the pandemic, when churches were open, when communities could come back together, we conversed more. We cared more about how you're feeling, how you're doing. And that is something that has really made us better people. But obviously, this remote work, remote connections have really built us. But it also gave us an opportunity to start talking about something very important that we had ignored for the longest time: mental health. We all started caring about how you are, because a lot of the times, I also am guilty of that. When people ask you how you are, even when you are not well, you say, I am fine. And you're not fine. And these are the things that we've taken organizations, universities. I don't think mental health was at the center of our operations like it is now before. So those are things that we took away from the COVID times, and they have made us better people. And now with all these technologies, we are saving a lot of money. Organizations are saving on travel, on conferences, because in the past, for you to attend 3 conferences across the world, it meant a lot of travel, a lot of money. But during the COVID times, I think I attended the most conferences, the most engagements, but I never traveled anywhere. And I got to meet lovely people like you.
You know, I love that, Nomsa, and I love being called a lovely person by you because I know what a tough taskmaster you are, and I really enjoy our graphic conversations. You know, again, you touched on one of the most important aspects. Suddenly, leadership became resilience. Suddenly, leadership became community. Suddenly, leadership became transformation. We all master change agency. It's something that's close to my heart. It's something that I will never stop drumming the beat of. Having come from a background of forensics and then working with multinationals and global mergers, thought was always a conduit that was part of where I said we need to keep this focused and we need to ensure it's here and now. There's a real role in both the storytelling that we're touching on and also how we think about both recovery from pandemic and recovery from change. It's empowerment, and mental health is not an illness. It is a daily recovery from challenge and perhaps circumstances that impact us and cause us to go into grief that will force us into a position of either wanting to fight against something or get it run away from it. But mental health is more an aspect of what tools do you have on board to experience the situation and not crumble, because there is always going to be something that throws us into a position of challenge. You and I have shared stories of what's turned us grey and white and brought us back to our hair colour, or sometimes great hats to get rid of this is really affecting us as leaders. But we need to take our teams on our shoulders. We need to take our people on our shoulders. We need to take our communities on our shoulders, because somehow we need to pass on whatever skills we have so they are more resilient. It can't be us in isolation. And also, we need to, in symbiosis as leaders, know that we've got to enable each other to care and to not be okay. We don't have to always be okay.
We don't. And funny enough, yesterday I posted something on my WhatsApp status, and it is okay to take care of people. But before I can take care of grass, I must take care of myself. Before I can pour out to your cup, I must fill up my cup, because if your cup is empty, what are you going to use to fill up? And out of the pandemic, we learned self care. And self care meant that I needed to be cognizant of the fact that as a human being, there are things that I need to put in for me to be okay, for me to be well, so that I can carry all this weight around me, so that I can be resilient. And a lot of the times in the leadership journey, as leaders, we keep going. You keep going, and you don't take a step back and say, let me breathe. Let me just take a walk and enjoy the air, enjoy the sun. We were forced, I don't know whether it worked or not. Those of us that caught COVID, we were forced vitamin D and we wanted to take it directly from the sun, whether it worked or not. But reality is, people started doing things they never did. If you had COVID, I don't know, I was told that I needed to walk early morning, breathe that air that is still clean. And I did that. And I still do that. Whether it works or not, scientifically, I don't know. But at a personal level, it worked in the sense that it gives you an opportunity to think, to reflect on your own before you engage with other people. But the pandemic gave us an opportunity to be prepared and to plan. And a lot of the times, people that go to work, people just wake up, pack their bags, go to work. The pandemic forced you to plan your day. You needed to know that if I have a meeting with Graziella at 8 a.m. South African time, 4 p.m. her time, it means I must at least connect 10 minutes, 5 minutes before to ensure that I have the connectivity. Whilst the pandemic took our friends, our families, and disrupted the world, there are positives that came out of it. And those positives are things that keep us going, are things that also challenge us, because I know that you sit in conferences at 2 a.m. and at times I look at you and I'm like, this one is not normal. But it's okay, my dear friend.
I know you're often like, how do you keep going? And I say, well, it's at 2 a.m. and I have to be there at 2 a.m. It was like last night there was a call that came in from Vienna from the UN, and I was like, it was 1 a.m. in the morning, but everyone forgot it was 1 a.m. in the morning. And you have to take it. You just have to be there and you have to be available. You know, I did love, and behind me, I said to you, I'm at my mum's house at the moment. It's rather a special podcast. So behind me, I've got this wonderful painting that was painted by my auntie who passed away, unfortunately, a couple of months ago. And she's very dear to me. I remember every time we went to her home, there was always food, there was always family, there was always welcome. And I feel that one of the things that when I talk with you is always that sense of family over countries. And when you spoke about your daughter and the things that you did, and I laugh with you about this because my daughters have said the same thing to me. Mum, you can't even make that. And I say, yeah, I can't make that. Why can't I make that anymore? And you suddenly realize that your career is taken over and you can't really make that. And during COVID, what we did do is we did cook together. We did have meals around a table. We played games. I wore funny hats. I did things that I hadn't done for years. I felt like my kids were little kids again. And I remember, it was just like this regular ritual. We'd pull out the Uno cards. We'd have the funny hats. They'd always say, Mum, you're cheating. And I'd be like, no, 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 I'm winning. And so there was always something that was humorous. And we all had our flair with cooking a meal. And I remember my youngest daughter really started to show her cooking flair. She always had it. And I think I got a bit lazy after COVID because I just took for granted that she was like taking over the cooking. And suddenly, recently, when she did her ACL, I started struggling in the kitchen again and going, oh gosh, that's what a pan looks like. That's what this looks like. And I need to get back to cooking. But I think the humor in it for me is what gets reflected back to us from our families, what gets back to the basics of we have to juggle many things. I think one of the things I love so much about your story, and that really always sits me back on my seat to just quietly listen to you, was how you went through having a child young. You went through being a grandmother young. You went through single-handedly doing many things that I also share that story with you and say I've had to do, but not in the depth of your circumstance. And I listen to you and it inspires me because it reminds me you don't have to get it right. You need to laugh at yourself most of the time and say, it's okay. I didn't get it right. I'm not Superwoman. I can do this, but I can't do this. And yes, I'm awake at 2 a.m, but that means I'm not very good at cooking breakfast, but I will get out there and I will have a go at it. because I'm earning the money
Wow.
to thing in, and I'm having a voice at the table. And I think that your voice at the table has been so powerful because likewise, I see you awake at odd times, dialing in at odd times. There's never a time you've said, no, I won't. You've always made it happen, no matter where you've been, whether you've been in the snow, in the hail, in heat, on the side of the road, trying to watch a football match in a community. I think you've always had time to get on the phone and to be a voice in any mechanism, be it a conference, a podcast, with people, or even just a voice for your athletes at your university, in your country, and across the continent. And I think that for me is that message that you, for me, are a superwoman when it comes to sport and voices. Um, I'd love you to tell us a particular time that you, as a leader, have faced a challenge that you think back and you go, wow, I learned something from that. Not COVID, but something else. If you have something else up your sleeve.
Wow, there are so many stories. And I think for me, the story of inclusion is very important. Back in 2009, as you know, that I was the first woman to be elected to the SAFA Executive Committee. I had to learn not to open my mouth to speak. I've had to learn that within a room where you are outnumbered, you can actually use the numbers in the room to your advantage. So I had a responsibility that whenever we were to have meetings, I would have side meetings with half the room before the meeting started. So it meant that as soon as I got the agenda and I got sight of what needed discussions, and I had to put forward the woman's voice. But the woman's voice couldn't come from me because every time I spoke, there were people who switched off before I even spoke. One, because at the time I was young. Two, as you know, in Africa, South Africa, there's a lot of patriarchy, and the dress code was also a problem. There was a certain old man who didn't speak to me when I was wearing pants. And I didn't know until a male colleague said to me, you must always watch when you are wearing pants, this old man doesn't greet you. But when you wear a dress or a skirt, he would talk to you. And I realized that actually my dress code is a problem. My voice is a problem. So what do I do? Let me get the people around the table to be sponsors of my own ideas. So when we got to the meeting, they spoke, I only supported. So it was not my idea, it was theirs in the room. But I know deep down that that is the point that I wanted to drive across. So, in essence, that story taught me a lot about strategic leadership. Strategic leadership requires you to do the extraordinary so that you can achieve the ordinary. And that in itself also built me as an individual to be able to engage with people outside the formal structures to influence the formal discussions and decisions. And so there are many stories that I can tell. And the fact that at that particular time when we started, it was extraordinary for a woman to be elected. But we then normalized it. At the moment, there's more women in the SAFA board. And after my time, there was then the first female vice president. And that is the role that I played in changing. But more than anything, it gives me comfort that the lessons from a situation of uncomfortability empowered me to be able to be this change agent that I am. And as you say, I got a daughter at 15 years old, and that is a baby. I was a baby myself, but I had a baby. And I grew up with my baby. In growing up with my baby, I didn't have a sister. So she's my sister now. And out of that, I'm able to tell other young people in the African continent that when you get a baby at an early age, it doesn't mean your dreams must stop. Yes, the time when you will reach your pinnacle might be affected, but it's not the end.
You know how beautiful your story is. You know, Nomsa, I was called a geriatric mother because I had my babies too late. And
Happens.
I know, and I love your story because when I was 15, I was kind of almost parenting myself. My parents were away, I had to do things by myself. And I listen to you and I think about myself, and I was a child trying to just deal with myself, let alone another human being. And what I love the most about you was your bravery, your humility. I think as a woman, I feel the struggle that you would have gone through. And I know that when I was carrying my baby at 33, and I was a geriatric mother and I lost my father and I had to bring her up on my own, having no real orientation. I was scared at 33. I can't imagine how you felt at 15 because I was feeling by the day isolated, burying him, not having her father, feeling like I was alone. And I literally isolated myself because I thought I might break her. And then I had to get up and go to work. And I took her to work with me and I just dug in and said, I have to make this happen. And I did. But at 15, you know, this is why I respect you so much. What you have done, the voice that you have, is a voice like no other I've ever met in my life. Because I think for all the women that I've worked with and all the women and girls, because before I even met you, there was a project that we won that was called Wahine Paretu. And we used to work with young girls in school who were pregnant at 14 and 15 to teach them to be strong young women and to know that life wasn't going to finish at that point. Women who were broken in communities, women who were suffering, women who were victims of domestic violence,
Yeah.
women who were isolated in countries that weren't their own. And in all of that, we were teaching them in this small community called Orake in New Zealand. Wahine Purotu was about the strength of women and saying, your life does not stop because there is a challenge. In fact, we're going to be the four legs of your stool to help you to know that you can have any life you choose because all you need is the community around you. And you need to know that one person, just one person believes in you because at that,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter. At that moment, it's everything.
True. I think, by the way, my tears are tears of joy. There's nothing sad about setbacks. And I always say to people, your setback is preparing you for a comeback. Now, at the time such things happen, and as you say, you need your community. My grandmother, may her soul rest in peace, she was amazing. And without her, I wouldn't have achieved this because she always said to me, you are a child, but you have a child. So it means you and your child must grow together. There are things that you will learn from your child. And I was blessed enough because the school I went to was across my grandmother's house. So I just went across the street to go to school. So I got my daughter, and I didn't stop going to school because as you know, I'm chubby, so nobody really noticed that I was pregnant. I was this chubby girl. At the time they found out I was pregnant at home, I was 8 months 2 weeks, so I was about to deliver, and I delivered over the school holidays. And when schools reopened, I went back to school at break time. I could just walk across to breastfeed my baby. But I also went back to school, and my life continued. And I wouldn't say it continued as normal. No, it wasn't normal. It was extra normal because I then had this other human being to take care of. But my life didn't stop. Now, this gave me strength to do other things that people believed that you can't do them. So part of the journey of getting a baby young gave me an opportunity to want to compete with men, because I said, I have a baby, I go to school, I still pass, but what stops me from challenging men? So, in essence, that setback that everyone looked at to say, how can she, how could she? Yes, it had happened, it was a setback, but it then gave me that extra advantage to believe in my abilities, to believe in the strength that I have as an individual to do the extraordinary. And I always say to young people around me, don't compare yourself with someone else. Have this journey as a unique journey, but take lessons from Graziella, take lessons from Nomsa, because you might not have fallen pregnant, you might have failed, or you might not have gotten accepted to the university you wanted to go to. But what do you do at the time you are not accepted is very important in your journey going forward. Because when you climb a mountain, for you to get to the top, there's going to be elevation, and it's going to be painful. It's going to be tough, but you can't give up, because giving up is never an option. Yes, you might need time to rest, to drink some water. And as you drink the water, you also need to reflect and say, what do I do better? Because before you go climb Kilimanjaro, you start with the little mountains so that you can be able to get to Kilimanjaro and summit it. So, in essence, our communities are very important, because the people around me, even at school, there was this lady who was already married, but she was in class with us. So she guided me on what to do as well. Because at break time, I would run, go breastfeed my child, and come back to school. And she would tell me, you must do this and this and this to ensure that you are comfortable enough so that other people don't start saying things. And I learned, and she was my community. And so, as people, we need to know that angels don't have wings. They're just like me and you.
And you are an angel. And I want to just say a couple of things that I think are really important. You know, you touched on some things just then, and I know that at times where life has turned itself upside down for me, and I feel like I couldn't cry as many tears as I needed to because I had to hold them back so that I could keep going through those moments. The one thing that came in was there was always someone who turned up, and they were unexpected, who just said, you know, you're not alone. You're not alone. Someone's done this
Yes?
before. And they just turn up every day and just say something. I know recently, the last 6 to 8 months has been really tough. And I've had one person who's called me every single day and just said, "So tell me what's happening today. Tell me what's happening today." And I've said it, and then they've been, okay, you know, that's normal. That's okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. And I've been, really? Yep, it's okay because you might feel like all these things that are happening look like they are. Why am I not dealing with that okay? Why is that tough that day? I think about my great friend Lisa from FIFA, and she rang me and she said to me, you know, like, have you thought about this? Like when I said I was tired and she was talking about, oh, well, actually, have you thought maybe it might be this? And so you think about things that people notice that you don't think they do. There's all, but one of the things I wanted to say, and I'm going to ask your permission to just reinforce again that we live in a world where, as women with these bodies and this hair and this way of showing ourselves in the world, the feminine spirit, whatever it must be, whatever it needs to be, has been so very judged and so very marginalized that it doesn't matter where we are, we seem to somehow be judged for the way our body is shaped, the way we dress across, the who we are, the whether we speak, the whether we don't speak, the being in silence, the wearing the skirt, the wearing the pants. I'm going to say to you that patriarchy is not just in Africa. It obviously is in Australia as well, and we've spoken about that too. It's everywhere we seem to stand. Somehow, this figure that we hold ourselves to be. I even remember someone saying to me, "You don't look like we'd expect you to look, having done what you've done." And I think, what on earth does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Can you please meet my skill base, not my face, not my figure, not my what I wear, what I don't wear, whether or not my face looks a certain way. I'm just here. See me here. And you know, Nomsa, you cut a formidable presence. And that presence, I am sure, was there when you were 15. And it does not deserve the undignified ways that humanity will describe us because it comes with associations that hurt us and that impact us with pain that doesn't need to be there. You are one beautiful, amazing human being who's done incredible things, and your presence makes a gift of itself every time you step in the room.
So, you know, society is a funny thing. People have got their own preconceived ideas and ideals that we should be like.
Hmm.
You know, there's things that are mind boggling that human beings do. People would ask me, why are you not married? It's none of your business. I chose not to be married. And society have got these boxes that they want to throw people in. I belong to no box. I am shaped the way I want to be shaped because society, as you say, people have got, I speak to you on the phone and I imagine you to be like this. And when I show up, I'm not what you had envisaged. Take me as I am, accept me for who I am, so that we can be able to deliver on this. And the issue of patriarchy and their belief. I'm a crier, by the way. I cry a lot, but I don't cry in front of those that I feel I need to fight with. So, in boardrooms where I need to drive across points, I would never cry. You would never see my tears. But after I am done, I would even cry in front of a mirror to get it out, but never allow your enemies to see you down. Never allow your detractors to see you hurt. You can say the most awful things in front of me about me. I would not even show a sign that I'm affected. I would look at you and I'm like, oh, so that's what you think. Anyway, suit yourself, but this is who I am. And the reality is that young women also need to know and learn this. And maybe I should say young people, because Society is so judgmental. Society would judge you based on your hairstyle. And
Mm.
a hairstyle is something that you choose because it's a look that makes you comfortable. But when society has decided that this look is for punks and we don't want punks in this environment, society then needs to say, then says, we close this one out, which is something that is very wrong, that especially people do because they come from a different background, unlike you. And the story of this old man who only spoke to me when I wore dresses,
Mm.
I didn't care if he was talking to me or not. I would get people to talk to him on my behalf. And whether he came around or not, I don't care. It doesn't affect the price of bread. And the reality is that there are situations and scenarios that would force me to wear that dress. I would wear it because I want to go in there. For example, in the African culture, you can't go into the kraal where they keep cows, livestock. In traditionally, a woman can't go in there wearing pants. You must wear a dress. It's tradition. I will respect tradition. If I have to go to a church where they say pants are not allowed, I'll wear a skirt because one, it is respect for the community itself, but it is also for me not to feel like an outcast. But in a boardroom, I will do what I want, and you will hear me whether you want to or not. And reality is, you are not God. Who are you to want to dictate what I must wear, how I must talk? There's this other gentleman who said to me, why are you always shouting? And I'm like, I'm not shouting because most of you in this room are old. So I'm speaking up so you can hear me properly.
Oh, Nomsa, I could talk to you for hours. I think one thing that I love about the liberating way in which you speak is that it is, it points out the ridiculousness of everything that happens, but also the respect. I think, going to the East, going to Africa, going to India, there are religions, there are reasons, there are things. If you are in an environment, you don't want to disrespect your environment. If there's something you need to know, then you do this. I mean, working on a Nigerian army base, I'm not going to sit around in a short skirt. I'm not going to go into the Kremlin in a certain way. I'm not going to, when I'm in the UAE and I need to be in certain places, my head is covered, my body is covered. I'm not about to expose myself because that's not what I do. I learned early that there are certain rules of conduct that I needed to have. In a boardroom like you, I will please myself. But if I need to be in a certain environment, then I'm going to think intelligently about that environment and respectfully. But the other thing is, I don't want to be judged or predetermined. And I think we need to draw that fine line where, as a woman in someone else's culture environment, if I need to be appropriately covered and cover my feet and myself, I will do that to respect and to be in that environment as a voice the way I need to be.
Yeah, but you also need to be sensitive to the people you are going to meet. And
Mm.
I always say to young people around me, when you are about to travel, whether it's a mission, whether it's a holiday, find out about the country, find out about the places you are going to go to, check the requirements, check the dress code, because for example, in Ivory Coast, there's you can be a tourist, but there's this it's a cathedral. I've just forgotten the name. You can't go in with pants. Now, reality is you can be a tourist, but you need to know that whilst I'm a tourist, for me to go into the cathedral and enjoy all these beautiful things or even go to mass, I must be wearing a dress or a skirt. So empower yourself with information, empower yourself with knowledge so that you don't lose out. What if you had traveled just to go there and only to find out that in your bags there's no dress, there's no skirt, and you have no money to buy? So do your homework. Due diligence is important. And I always say to my granddaughter,